Welcome back to the Black and Raw podcast. I'm your host, Tino Kudatonda Vunzaba. No, I ain't gonna repeat that. Here's a podcast that's going to dialogue and the space for black men to be their most authentic selves. Now, what if I told you that my guest today was working in Silicon Valley around the time Steve Jobs was building Apple? What if I told you that he actually worked with Steve Jobs? What if I told you that my guest had created the blueprint for what we now know as Facebook Messenger, WhatsApp Messenger? What if I told you that he actually built a live chat that got used by the CIA, that got bought by the CIA? What if I told you now that he's using his 40 years of experience being in the tech industry to help build the black community and get those into tech jobs? What if I told you that he built a program for Microsoft, an apprenticeship that has now been employing and reaching out to women of ethnic minorities and encouraging them to come into tech? What if I told you that he had worked for Microsoft for 24 years and was instrumental in building their India side of the company? Well, my guest has done all of that and more. William A. Adams comes onto the podcast today to talk about his journey through tech, to talk about what it was like being in Silicon Valley during the 80s, how building companies has changed now where people maybe just want to make money instead of building world-class companies. You know, he also comes onto the podcast, we talk about AI, we talk about the benefits of it, the negatives of it. We discuss about how the space race in the 80s and now is impacting technology. And that's just a number of things we talk about. We also talk about his journey, about him being in India and how he discovered his blackness while he was in India. And so there's a lot of interesting things in this episode, which I know you guys are going to love. And let me give you a little snippet actually of what you got to look forward to in this episode. So we're going to move across.
That's when my brother and I kind of entered the scene, which was like the early 90s. And Silicon Valley back then wasn't quite what it is now. Nowadays, when you say tech, and you talk about tech bros and the microdosing and all that. These are a bunch of people who are running around as like, I'm going to make it rich. I'm going to have some idea. I'm going to get VC funding. I'm going to be a millionaire, you know. Back then we were building companies, you know. It's like, oh, we're going to change the world. And I won't say that it was anyone's last thought to make money, but it wasn't the cash out. Like, I'm just going to get the first big VC paycheck and then I'm done. And that seems to be prevalent today. It's like, get the big payout and then you're out, right?
Yeah.
It's like, no, we're in it to build big, lasting companies that had positive world impact. At least that was the ideal. And I had to say, well, who am I? You know, I don't have my house. I don't have my car. I don't have all the trappings of being the tech dude in the US. Who am I? And you're faced with a million religions and languages and foods and all the rest. And you have to be very clear about defining who you are. You can get lost, right? You can meander quite a bit. So I found it, and that's when I discovered I discovered my blackness when I was in India.
In India. Who would have thought?
Yeah, it's like, okay, well, let me look back in my history and what are the things that I learned back then that are really important and are black about me. And you know, so I think it's important for all of us to really define our blackness, if that's important to you. But now tech is in everything, particularly as we slide into AI and things like ChatGPT and whatnot. Everybody's doing tech. But what I'm trying to do is show people that having an equity share of technology is what's truly important. It's in terms of financial stability and future generations and stuff like that. So yes, we all have cell phones, but owning stock in Apple is even better, right? Having an equity share, because as that company grows, your wealth is going to grow. And that's something you can spend on your family and hand down to your children and all that.
So, now that you got a little snippet of what you got to look forward to in this episode, I hope you guys enjoy this episode. Please tell me what you think about it in the comments section, and tell me what you think about AI and, you know, ChatGPT and all of that stuff. We talk about that, and I think you guys are going to get some really good nuggets of information out of this. There was a bit of my Wi-Fi had a bit of an issues, so I'm going to try and make sure the editing on this episode doesn't make it feel like there was some chopping and changing and asking of repeat this, please, repeat that. So we'll see how it goes. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Please tell me what you think of it. And here is my conversation with William A. Adams. So, William, welcome to the Black and Raw podcast. It's really good to have you on.
Well, thank you.
It's all right. And yeah, when I saw your profile, I knew you were someone that I needed to get in touch with, especially because I haven't talked to anybody that's in tech for my podcast, and I like technology, and learning more about the tech world and industry. So it was very up my alley. But then also, I think it'd be very good for anybody listening that wants to get into tech or just wants to know a bit more about it.
Yeah, tech, pretty broad area, right?
Yeah, you've got a lot of different things in technology, don't you? I think AI is something that we keep hearing about a lot lately, don't we?
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is kind of scary, a little bit scary, and I don't know, good. I guess good and bad. Good things can happen from it, but then
someone asked me a question a few months back. It was, are you afraid of the weapons of computing and whatnot? I said, well, we've had weapons forever. The first time someone picked up a stone and crashed someone's skull with it, that was the weapon, right? Yeah. So we always have weapons. We always have tools. The question is, how are you going to use the tool? So AI is just another tool, right?
Yeah.
And it's as dangerous or as beneficial as a gun. You can hunt for food, or you can kill another person. So you have to be careful how you use the weapon and how you regulate the weapon and all the rest, but it's just another tool.
Yeah, I guess it's like nuclear power as well, isn't it? When they're discovering that, they're like, oh, we could bomb people or we could power homes.
Limitless energy.
Yeah. So for my audience, I'd love for them to get a bit to just get a bit of information about you and stuff like that, and a bit about your history in tech. And you were around in the Silicon Valley in the 80s. So I just wanted to know, what did Silicon Valley look like in the 80s? Because we now know it as this huge, giant tech place where tech mobiles are microdosing and, wearing shorts. And, we've all got the idea of what Silicon Valley is now. But I wanted to know sort of what was it like, I guess, in the early stages?
Back in the day. Well, the Valley, specifically the San Francisco Bay Area, really started growing up in hardware technology before the 80s. So the birth of Intel, which we all know, Intel, dun, 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 dun. So hardware, and that was birthed because there was a bit of aerospace going on way back then. So a lot of the hardware companies were birthing around aerospace, right? So the development of transistors and whatnot was to help the space program. So in Southern California, they were creating airplanes and whatnot. And in Northern California, they were creating the electronics that made stuff fly, And then up here in where I am in Seattle, Boeing was making airplanes. So in the earliest days, it was hardware. And then after the hardware had its time through the space program through the 60s and early 70s, along came more software. So it's like, okay, Intel. Then along came this company called Adobe. And then along came this other company called Apple. And then suddenly the software started becoming more important. That's when my brother and I kind of entered the scene, which was like the early 90s. And Silicon Valley back then wasn't quite what it is now. Nowadays, when you say tech and you talk about tech bros and the microdosing and all that, these are a bunch of people who are running around. It's like, I'm going to make it rich. I'm going to have some idea. I'm going to get VC funding. I'm going to be a millionaire, Back then, we were building companies, It's like, we're going to change the world. And I won't say that it was anyone's last thought to make money, but it wasn't the cash out, like, I'm just going to get the first big VC paycheck and then I'm done. And that seems to be prevalent today. It's like, get the big payout and then you're out, right?
Yeah.
It's like, no, we're in it to build big, lasting companies that had positive world impact. At least that was the ideal. So that was the early days. If you can't see me, I'm a Black man in tech. That was a rarity. It's still a rarity. We did not get a bunch of VC money.
Ah,
It's the way it
shame.
goes.
It's the way it goes, isn't it?
And today, you're still not going to get a bunch of VC money.
You're gonna have to try and do something else, aren't you?
Well, you have to
Or
work
pivot.
harder. You have to work harder at it. And this is just common for the culture I live in. If you're Black, you're going to work harder for it. That's all there is to it.
Yeah. Your parents always told you that thing of like, oh, you've got to work twice as hard
Twice
as the
as
white
hard
people.
for half as much.
Yeah.
And that's absolutely true. Smarter, faster, stronger. So Silicon Valley in the early days is like that, and now it's much more software. Although Apple is still the number one company, and they're kind of soft hard, right?
Yeah,
Software
they make
and
phones,
hardware.
but then also you've got them, they've got their software and their laptops and I guess they do a bit of both, don't they, really?
Yeah, and then on the other end, I mean, I spent 24 years at Microsoft. I'm kind of skipping ahead, but 24 years at Microsoft outside Silicon Valley, and they're more pure software, although they have some hardware, but not really. They're not a hardware company like Apple is. I mean, they're really a software company. So you have those two comparisons that you can make. So early days, I saw the birth of personal computers. I had a hand in a lot of it, and I grew up with it. So I've seen a lot of transition, everything from the birth of cell phones to the internet to, whatever the AI stuff that we were talking about earlier.
Yeah, it's crazy actually when you think about it, isn't it? Like change happens slowly, but then at the same time, like if you look back over the last 20, 30 years, like even 40 years, we've came from brick phones now into you've got little computers in your hands, and like it's and I can only ever imagine what's going to happen in the next 30, 40 years. Like where would get, if we're already talking about AI now, like what we're going to look like in the next 30, 40 years, which is...
It's going to be dramatic.
Yeah. I mean, and we've already got people going to space as well. You were saying that. I found that interesting how they were tailored quite for the space race in the 80s. And we're sort of seeing that now as well, especially with private companies taking their own things. And, you got Elon Musk with the SpaceX and NASA also trying to go to the moon and colonize the moon. So it's very interesting where we might be in a few years' time.
No, I was just saying, you were talking about, NASA and SpaceX, and I think I think that will have the same transformative effect on technology that it did in the 60s. We had the real hard drive for what we now call CPUs, central processing units, transistor development, all that sort of stuff was driven by the space race. And we're at it again. And it's going to have the same effect where AI will be advanced, material science is being advanced. We're 3D printing rockets, little known fact. It's like, those rocket engines, they're 3D printed, out of exotic materials, but they're 3D printed. So I think the march of space, again, is going to drive huge transformations in technology, and we the average folk, like you said, we won't notice some of the changes, but some of the changes are going to be dramatic shifts.
Yeah,
like recently we got Chat GPT, and now everybody's like talking to the computer.
Everyone's got someone to do their assignments, and
6 months. It only took 6 months. I mean, it's been in works for years, but 6 months, and now everyone's like, "Oh yeah, Chat GPT." Google who?
Yeah, it's crazy. South Park also did an episode on it, which was absolutely funny. And like everybody was using it. Everyone was using it to reply back to each other's messages. They're like, "Oh, just use this thing called Chat GPT. You don't even have to talk to your girlfriend. You can just put in a response and it'll give you a response back." And then like one of the characters would be hanging out with his girlfriend. She's like, "Oh, that was really meaningful what you said." And he was like, "I don't know
what I say."
So even that, it's even started to get into the culture now as well. I mean, South Park's always been on
just
it.
like that. If it's in South Park, it's like, oh, they've already made it. It's only been out for 6 months. So what's going on here?
Definitely. So you said you and your brother originally started a company during the
Yeah.
80s. What was that company called? What did you guys do? And also, what was it like working with your brother as well?
That company was called Adamation. It was a play on our last name Adams, and
Nice. I like that.
automation and computation. So Adamation. And we did some custom software design and development, and had some box product when you actually used to send out a disk to a customer with a program on it in a box, you know. So we did a lot of that, and we did a lot of early development on Next computers, which is something that Steve Jobs did when he left Apple for a while. So we were just doing custom software development and coming up with all sorts of innovative stuff um, at the time. Like there's one thing that we did called Livewire, which was the precursor to what we now call any of these chat programs. You know, anything where you can type and chat back and forth.
Facebook Messenger,
all that stuff, all of that
Skype
stuff,
and all of that. Yeah.
Yeah, so we did Livewire back in like 1991. So we were doing early stuff like that, or just radical database design and development, and we did distributed database updates and just all sorts of stuff. This was pre-internet.
Yeah.
We would send updates via email, and they would synchronize databases across different businesses using email messages.
Hard to imagine that now. Like,
yeah, I mean, now it's like that. Now it's all like, yeah, of course we have chats on my phone. It's like, we didn't have it back then. So, you know, we were just doing a lot of inventive stuff like that. And then eventually I went on to Microsoft in 98, and he carried on the flame for a few more years doing some other stuff.
Nice. No, that's good. That's good.
And how was it working with my brother?
Yeah, how was it working with you?
Well, my brother and I have been playmates our entire lives. So it was a bit rough to be in business because someone's the boss, and you know, but we had a fairly good division of labors. Like I'm the tech guy and he was the business guy.
Okay.
You know,
times.
It was a bit rough sometimes, but we starved well together. And we made it through and supported each other and had our little business. So we still collaborate today, even. We're not in the same business, the same company, but we still enjoy working with each other. It's just a bit different now.
No, that's brilliant, and I've always thought how would I work with my siblings, and it's good to hear that you guys, obviously you have your you'll have your disagreements and stuff like that, but you guys said that you're sort of playmates. It was quite play to be with each other, and one had their expertise, and your brother had his in business, you had yours in tech. So a good division of labor, as you were saying. Like you don't have to sort of. It's not like two people are good at tech, so there's that sort of like, wow, I know this, and yeah, exactly. So you're both cleared special expertise, which is good. I'm glad. I'm glad that sort of worked out for you guys like that too.
Yeah, it can work. I mean, I would say probably more often than not, it is against working with family, but it can work. But there's just some guidelines you have to follow to not ensure, but to increase your chances of success.
No, true. And so you've teased it already in terms of going to work for Microsoft. How did you get the job for working for Microsoft, and I guess what did you do there?
Well, before I went, I worked with the guy at this other venture called Taligent. It was a joint venture between Apple and IBM. They were working on this operating system. We had sold them to some technology, and we were integrating it into their operating system. I met this guy, Chris Lovett, and he had after that he had gone on to Microsoft, and he was there for a year. And he just sent me an email at some point and said, "Hey, would you like to come work on this thing called XML?" XML is you can just think of it like HTML. You know, it's a web technology.
What's HTML?
Yeah, it's kind of like HTML.
What is HTML?
Oh, HTML is when you go to a web page and you see text, What's
Yeah.
behind it, the code is called HTML. It's just
Oh,
the
okay.
format of the text that the browsers are. And then they give you beautiful pictures. So HTML plus JavaScript is how you see the web.
Okay. Oh,
right?
interesting.
So yeah, I was at the end of my animation stuff, and I was at this other company called B for a couple of years, and he just sent me the email. And I was like, that sounds like fun. Okay.
Why not? Let's just go.
Yeah, why not? Well, and you got to keep in mind, in 1998 was the dot-com fizzy years. You know, the
the boom
dot-coms
era.
were going booming. Microsoft was on the verge of being taken apart by the Department of Justice for being a monopoly.
Wow.
And I thought, well, and there's probably a recession coming. So what better place to be than in a recession than one of these mega corporations?
Yeah, with a monopoly. Like, they'll be fine.
Yeah, with a monopoly. And either the DOJ is going to take them down or not. Either way, it's going to be a fun ride. So, okay. I joined the company in 98 as a programmer and soon became a manager and did the XML thing and all sorts of other things. And I don't know, 24 years later, just last year, I thought, okay, I'm done. And I left.
Wow. 24 years. That's a wow. That is a long time.
That's a lifetime.
How did you do 24 years at Microsoft? Like, I think especially now,
it's like prison time.
And you only just got out last year.
How did you do 24 years? It's like, well, I did it 2 years at a time.
Okay.
And what I mean by that is every 2 years, first of all, when I went, I said, I'm just going to do this for 2 years. You know, I'll get my signing bonus, I'll spend that, and then I'll, reassess. So every 2 years, I just looked at my environment and said, well, am I getting out of this deal? Is this the best deal? Right? Both in terms of my personal satisfaction, the compensation, everything, the whole thing. Every 2 years, I just asked myself that question. And I would look around the industry, who's doing what, and all that. Is this the best deal? And the answer was always, yeah, this is the best deal. So just 2 years at a time. During one period in there, I moved to India. So I lived in India for 3 years.
Oh, wow. What was that like?
It was dramatic. So I was working for Microsoft, training all the new engineers how to be better engineers because we were growing our India development center. It was fledgling at the point. And I grew it, helped them absorb like 300 new college hires a year. They all went through my training programs. And it's like, I'm going to teach you how to be an engineer at Microsoft. So, so every 2 years, and things like India is like, yeah, how often do you get a chance to go to a foreign country and live under the umbrella of mega corporation and do your thing?
No, that must have been cool. And exploring a new society like that as well. There's India's as well.
Yeah.
Quite a diverse and rich culture and got great food too. So,
yeah,
that is that's a good deal.
That was one of those perks, right? It's like, okay, I get to live in a foreign land. I get to design the program. I get to build out classrooms. I get to write code. I get to write my own ticket. So it's like, okay, that's a pretty good deal.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. No, that is a pretty good deal. And I guess you just did it 12 times. You're just like, all right, well, let me see these 2 years, see how it is and see how everything's going. So no, that's interesting. Yeah. That is very interesting. And so you've also mentioned sort of being the only Black person in a room at times. And at Microsoft, I can imagine it was sort of just you in that. So like, how did you deal with that? Like were you hyper aware of it in those instances?
No, because it's normal, right? I mean, I grew up in a neighborhood that had, well, actually the side of the freeway we ended up on, we were surrounded by Mexican families. So I grew up in a Mexican neighborhood in the suburbs of Los Angeles. And so there, and then of course we went to school and there weren't that many Black kids at our school. So from an early age, we were already the only black kids.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, we had some black friends, but like my mom's best friend, they were a white family from work, and so we were very acculturated to a white and Hispanic culture.
Interesting mixes.
Yeah, and that's not to say we didn't know what it was to be black. We did. We listened to our black music and read our black comic books, and cheered on our black athletes and music artists. But we were not immersed in black culture. So being in a room with a bunch of white folks or Mexicans was like, yeah, okay, yeah.
All right, I know this. Yeah.
Yes, I don't feel uncomfortable. So it's the same at Microsoft or in Silicon Valley for that fact, right? It's like, I know this culture. It's not foreign to me. I don't feel like I stand out. Now, if you don't realize that you're also being excluded from a lot of stuff, and you never forget you're going to have to work twice as hard, but you don't realize what that means until a few promotions pass you by and a few opportunities pass you by, and so you're aware of it, but it's not like I'm in a meeting every day and I'm going, damned if I'm not the only black guy here again. Where the black folks at? It's like, no, you just carry on and do your best.
Yeah. No, interesting. I guess, as you were saying, because of your upbringing, that you were sort of just quite used to the environments that you were in. And there was something that you also just said, which I wanted to ask further on, but now I forgot it. It's gone out my head. But I think, I know, unfortunate. My dad always says if it's not important, then it was not worth remembering. But then sometimes you just forget.
Maybe it'll come back.
Maybe. But yeah, I think it's interesting that thought of being the only black person in a room, because for me, I always grew up around white people. And so I've always been, and that was also a bit of what birthed the Black and Raw podcast, was maybe that I didn't feel black because of what black perceptions are. But I think being able to... You're
not black enough.
Yeah, exactly. I don't listen to J. Cole. I must not be black. But I think being able to dip into both worlds, I think actually sort of can help, because unfortunately, most of the higher up places, the higher you go, the whiter it'll be, realistically. I'm glad. I think that will start to change, but I think for now, the system works how it was designed.
Well, it also depends on what culture you're talking about. And it has nothing to do with the higher you go, the wider you go. It's like, no, the higher you go, the more elite it is. So there's classism in every culture. And if you go to Africa and you're poor, you're not going anywhere, just like if you're black in America. So it all depends on your family, the money they have, who they're connected to, and all the rest. And that's true for every culture. It's okay.
Apologies.
I was just talking about racism and classism, and the fact that I'm black. If I go to Africa, that's not going to help me because then the dominant selector is class. How much money you have, not the color of your skin, because everyone's black. So, well, it's not true. Not everyone's black in Africa, but it's not the dominant thing. What dominates more is what tribe you're from, what family you're from, the money you have, things like this. So I think it's just human nature to discriminate, based on various factors. But what I found in being an only, if you will, sometimes, is it's super important to define who you are. What is your creed? What do you stand for? What are your life goals? And I found this particularly when I went to India, and I had to say, well, who am I? I don't have my house. I don't have my car. I don't have all the trappings of being the tech dude in the US. Who am I? And you're faced with a million religions and languages and foods and all the rest. And you have to be very clear about defining who you are. You can get lost, right? You can meander quite a bit. So I found it, and that's when I discovered I discovered my blackness when I was in India.
In India. Who would have thought?
Yeah, it's like, okay, well, let me look back in my history and what are the things that I learned back then that are really important and are Black about me. And, so I think it's important for all of us to really define our Blackness if that's important to you. So, and then you can carry forward because then you have something that you're saying, I am this, you
Mm.
know. And that helps you in those meetings when you're the only whatever the heck people labeled you as. You can say, "Yeah, but I'm a tech guy,
Mm. I
and
know my stuff.
I know my stuff, and I'm as tech
Yeah.
as you are, and it doesn't matter what the color of my skin is. I'm still as tech as you are." So you have to define yourself clearly, and that's what helps carry you through those periods where you're like, "Oh man, I'm the only blah 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 in here." So.
Yeah, that's quite. I think that's quite good. To be fair, and it's definitely something which I think is because we've had conversations with people before, and that is sort of what people say in terms of that. Like, how do you stay yourself? How do you be authentic? How do you like, especially with imposter syndrome as well, when some people feel that they're like, the answer is sort of getting to know yourself and who you are and know what you bring to the table, no matter your skin, your class,
Yep.
or disability or anything. And so I think that's a powerful thing in which I don't know. I say it's simple. It's a simple question, but then answering it is then more difficult,
Hard
isn't
to
it?
answer.
Yeah, hard to answer. Simple question, but hard to answer.
Yeah, I didn't answer it until I was about 40.
Mm.
So it took a while. It took a minute.
Took you going to India.
Took me going to India and the precursor to going to India and working with a really good friend who we were really open with each other. So it takes a while, and it's something I would not have been able to do in my youth because I didn't have the patience or the wisdom or the experiences to do it. So I always applaud when I see younger people who are like just got it locked in. I'm like, good on you, mate. I was a mess at your age. I didn't know who I was. All I knew was that I wrote code, and I was really good at that. So all I knew was I was this, possibly autistic code writer, and that's all I did. But I was a lot more than that. So.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think that's bro as well. Like the fact that at the end of the day you can still be 40 and figure out who you are. And it's good. The younger you get it, obviously is great, but like, and I think especially for young people now, I feel like there is a pressure to be like, oh, I need to have all my stuff together in my 20s. When it's like realistically, you don't have to. The people we look at, the people we look at didn't have their stuff all together. So it's okay to be figuring it out as you're going along.
Yeah, your 20s are for exploring. I mean, that's what your 20s are for, is to have all the experiments so that in your 30s you do have a chance of figuring it out. So.
Definitely. And so I'd love to find out a bit in terms about what you're doing now, and how you are helping and supporting the community to get into tech. So yeah, tell me and tell my audience about what you're doing now then.
Well, I'm taking my 40 years of being in tech and turning it into helping other people get into tech in different ways. So tech, let's define that first. So tech, in air quotes, is everything now. I mean, tech ate the world, right? Back in the day, tech meant big software companies and writing software and this, that, and the other thing. And there were like 5, 10, 20 companies. But now tech is in everything, particularly as we slide into AI and things like ChatGPT and whatnot. Everybody's doing tech. But what I'm trying to do is show people that having an equity share of technology is what's truly important. It's in terms of financial stability and future generations and stuff like that. So yes, we all have cell phones, but owning stock in Apple is even better, right? Having an equity share, because as that company grows, your wealth is going to grow, and that's something you can spend on your family and hand down to your children and all that. So that's what I'm trying to do, and I do that by demonstrating, like, I'm creating software and I'm selling software, and I can demonstrate how to do tech by doing tech. And then doing podcasts, and I do tutorials online where I have, here's how you write this kind of code. So just gathering all sorts of resources. So I have a website, william-a-adams.com, and it's got all the resources, so videos and podcasts and pointers to my code and writings and all that. So that's what I'm doing. I'm basically just trying to say, all right, I got mine. Now let me show you how to get yours. Right?
Yeah. Giving
So
back to the
that's
community.
what I'm doing.
Yeah, which is brilliant. I like how you said there as well that like having shares in Apple, because like everyone always says, oh, if I could time travel, or people like, I could time travel, like I'd go and put shares in Apple, or I'd go and put shares in Facebook. But like I feel like we can educate young people and even ourselves to be like, okay, because I think shares in Apples are very spenny right now, but you can maybe try and find what you think is going to be maybe not the next Apple, maybe the next Apple, but at least you can go and invest into tech places and see your wealth grow. And it's good to be able to teach that to others as well.
We could do a whole episode on wealth creation and stock investing and what not to invest in. I actually did like that a couple of weeks ago. But yeah, it's essentially just the first step is understanding the difference between being an investor and being a consumer, right? Consumers like, oh, I'm going to buy a Rolex, I'm going to buy a phone, I'm going to buy a Tesla, I'm going to consume. It's like, you're just burning money. An investor says, yeah, I'm going to buy a car. My first one's going to be cheaper, something I can afford. It's like in your 20s, you don't think like this, but you need to be on the down low, save some of that money and invest it in something that's going to grow, because all those other consumer items depreciate. All you're doing is burning money, right? So equity is about growing the money, not burning it. So that's the first lesson, is just learning that.
So yeah, I think what you're doing in the community, and for the Black community actually is really good, because I think we don't get these lessons. Like our parents were never taught these lessons, and at school they don't teach you these lessons. So I think it's good for leaders like you and for others that are helping to actually raise up this new generation of young people to be aware of those things. And then you pass those on to your kids. Like it's a good sort of then build your intergenerational wealth. You build good habits and good strategies that can be passed down.
Yeah, it's quite different. Like you said, my parents, forget about talking about stocks or anything else. They were just trying to keep us from joining gangs or getting killed on the streets. So, they were happy that we made it through high school and went off to college. My kids know what stocks are. They're not going through that same thing that I went through growing up. So they know what Algorand is the cryptocurrency. They know what cryptocurrencies are.
Yeah.
And they know what gambling is, and they know the ills of this, that, and the other thing. So yeah, they're getting an equity education.
Yeah, an equity education. No, I like that. And I like how you're passing on those skills to your younger children as well, or to your children. Got to start in the home, doesn't it? And then you can also give that to the rest of the community too, which is great. And I guess from all the conversation that we've been having, you've done quite a lot as well, and you've been in the game for a while. In terms of working at Microsoft and working with your brother and setting up that company, and then, doing your own stuff that you're doing now. I wanted to know how you think about your own legacy and sort of how you view legacy, and whether is that something important to you? I want to sort of know your thoughts and feelings on that.
Well, important. I think it's nice that I can look back on the work that I've done and I'm satisfied with what I've done, right? I've helped people get jobs directly, whether I hired them or whatever. Um, I'm happy about that. Once I'm dead, I don't care about anything. It's like legacy. Legacy doesn't really mean much to me. All I do is say I did my best. I gave my children a fair chance. I hope, and I'm satisfied with my performance there. And the rest is up to the rest. I don't care if my name is on some building and they're singing songs about me 50 years after I'm gone. That's not important to me. So I'm not going to build monuments to myself because, in the end, God determines how you're remembered. So I'm not worried about that, but I'm very happy and satisfied with my performance on this planet to date.
Yeah.
And I'm going to continue doing things that satisfy me in that way, right? I would be unhappy if I was just doing nothing. It's like, no, I've got lots of gifts and I've gotten lots of breaks and I've gotten lots of support over the years. I would feel kind of guilty and sad if I wasn't sharing all the gifts that I was given, because like, well, why did we give you all those gifts and you're not helping anybody?
To squander them. Yeah.
To squander them. And perhaps this is part of me learning from being in India, where you see just all sorts of stuff around you. It's like, well, if you don't help those people, who do you think is going to help them? Right? You're the one with all the money. You need to pay for all those people to survive. It's like, oh yeah, that's right. They don't have Social Security like we do. So
yeah.
So I feel responsible.
Go on. You
I
feel
feel
responsible,
right? And I feel obligated. And I look at our billionaires in the world and it's like, don't you feel obligated? Because we gave you all our riches and all you're doing is like cruising around an island on a giant yacht.
Making people pay £5 for Twitter.
Yeah, I mean, come on. What are you doing with all the riches that we entrusted you with? And if it's just self-fulfillment, that's kind of sad because when you're gone, right? So anyway, that's my thing.
So do you think billionaires have like a responsibility to make the world a better place than when they've left it?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Now, if I'm a billionaire, maybe it's like, no, my only responsibility is keep my money. Maybe that's their attitude. I don't know. I'm not a billionaire. I personally think it is, and even when I'm not a billionaire, but people might be looking at me and saying, we think you're responsible for taking care of us and making the world a better place. Yeah. So I'm going to look up and say the same thing, right? It's like we're all responsible for making things better. But that comes down to, why do you think you're here in the first place? And some people are like, I'm here to get my best and I don't care about anything else. Like, okay, that's one way to live. I don't live like that. So I expect, that people will make things better than they found them.
Yeah, I personally agree with you as well, because I do think our purpose on sort of this earth is to leave in a better place than we found it, and also to try and make it nicer for the people that are living in it currently. Like, especially if you've got the tools and the skills and the money to be able to improve people's lives, then you can do that. And then usually then the money also comes alongside it when you're helping people. Like, you get given back sort of good karma or omens or however people want to describe it. But I think the world sort of pays you back for like the richness that you bring. And it doesn't even have to be that you get paid back in wealth, but that maybe you're blessed with a really good family, or maybe you're blessed with great friends, or you've got peace in your life. And it's, you can be a billionaire and you can be hella stressful, like some people say, would you rather, cry in a Ferrari or cry, being poor? But I don't know. I think I'd rather be happy and poor than be crying in a Lambo, personally.
Yeah. I mean, there's personal fulfillment, and I don't want to be, I don't think I have to be austere. I don't have to give away all my wealth to help people, but I certainly don't have to hoard it, right? It's like, come on, spend some of that treasure. You can help a lot of people. So yeah, I don't want to be happy and poor rather than crying in a Lambo. I don't want a Lambo. And I don't want to be poor either.
Yeah, true. Yeah. Ideally, you want to have money and you want to help people, you know?
Yeah, but that is if you take it to the extreme, it's like being poor with surrounded by family and friends versus in the Lambo by yourself. I'll take the poor family and friends.
Yeah, definitely.
Definitely. Alone with a Lambo and I'm sitting on top of all a pile of gold, pointless. Absolutely pointless for me, right?
Yeah. No, I agree
Some
with you.
people
For
might
me
like
as well.
that, but for me, no, thank you.
Definitely. So William, I just wanted to ask you my final question, which I ask all my guests, and I'm going to tailor it for our conversation. But say if there's a young black boy that's listening to this conversation and they want to get into technology, into the tech space as we've been talking about, is there anything that you know, or anything that we've talked about can help them sort of do that and get into the tech space?
And surprisingly, this answer has changed somewhat over the last 6 months. First and foremost, find your passion. Find what you're interested in most, no matter what it is, whether it be music, sports, whatever the heck. Find something that you're passionate about because you're going to be the most happiest doing your passion, right? Then find a tech angle to that thing, right? Don't go out and just say, I'm going to learn to program. And you don't know what to program. You have it says, I'm just going to become a programming worker. It's like, okay, you're going to be so unhappy. You're going to quit within a couple of years. It's not going to be the path. So find your passion and then find a tech angle to it. And now have a conversation with ChatGPT to help you plot a path. Because that tool, now people get confused about ChatGPT. They think it's intelligent. It's like, it's not intelligent. It's just read everything on the planet. So it can stitch together paragraphs and sentences in ways that you think is intelligent. But ChatGPT is a good tool to use to help you explore and ask questions that you wouldn't normally be able to get answered, including things like, I was thinking of applying technology in farming. Can you recommend some things I can do with technology in farming? And ChatGPT can go, here you go. Here's 5 things you might pursue, right? So I would say leverage that tool. If you don't already have a subscription, or use the free tier, I would leverage that tool to help me plot my course in technology.
Yeah, bro. And I guess it comes full circle because we started the conversation sort of talking about ChatGPT and can technology be useful, or is AI for, the worst? But I guess in that instance, I never even thought about using it like that either.
Yeah.
Because you can find a niche, as you're saying, if you find technology in farming, that's quite a niche. I couldn't think of anything where that might be useful, but I'm sure there is, and that's a really good resource to use as well. So
I mean, just think about it. It's like you're talking to somebody who's read everything on the planet, and you're asking them a question. That's what you're doing with ChatGPT.
Interesting. We would think that person's intelligent though, or just has so much time on their hands to read everything.
Yeah.
So no, thank you, William. Thank you very much for joining me. Is there anything you'd like to plug? I know you mentioned your website earlier. I'm going to put that into the show notes as well.
Yeah, that's the best thing. The website, is william-a-adams.com. Everything I have to do, everything I'm saying is on there.
Bro, no, thank you very much. So yeah, William, I hope you have a good day. For anyone listening to this, it might be a bit choppy because there was some technical difficulties, but I apologize.
We worked through it.
We worked through it. I worked through it. The editing is going to be something. I'm going to say this, and then the editing is going to clear it all up. That's my hope.
Brilliant.
So yeah, no, thank you very much, William, for joining me.
Right.
And I hope you have a good day.
Thanks for having me.
Bro.
All right. Bye.
Bye-bye.
So that is the end of the episode. I hope you guys really enjoyed this episode. I really enjoyed talking with William. I think his wealth of experience, I mean, like he said, he's been in the tech industry for 40 years. So he knows his stuff, he knows what he's talking about. And I think there are lots of interesting things that can come out of this episode. And I hope you guys enjoyed it. William talks about finding himself in India and being able to travel to India for Google was a massive opportunity for him, but maybe he didn't realize how much of an impact it was going to have on his personal development. And I think I'm going to touch on this for a little bit because I love to travel. I think traveling is something which broadens our horizons. It challenges us. It puts us out of our comfort zone. Like being in a country where you don't know the language and you don't know the people, and you've got to just explore and find out, you know. Quite fortunately, well, is it fortunately, you know, the British colonized everywhere. So English is tried to at least be understood everywhere you go. So especially if you're English speaking, it's a bit more easier to travel. But I do think it's really good to go and experience different cultures and different environments and see what life is like for people there, you know. I went to Sweden. I solo traveled to Sweden. That's actually what, I don't know if you can see my first tattoo from where you are. That's my first tattoo. It's got different Viking runes and it's got the coordinates of Stockholm because it's the first place I ever traveled by myself. Funny story, actually. I'm going to divert a little bit on that. I don't know why I chose Sweden, but Sweden, because I wanted to go on holiday with my girlfriend at the time, my parents were like, no, you can't do that. I think I was 18 or something, 19. They're like, no, you can't go on holiday with your girlfriend. So I was like, fine. You know, I'll just go somewhere else. I'll go by myself. If you want to let me go with my girlfriend, I'll go by myself. So I went by myself. I literally looked at the first place on Skyscanner and I saw Stockholm and I was like, I'm gonna go to Stockholm. So that's the story of how I ended up in Stockholm. But in Sweden, they have this thing called fika, which is like at lunchtime, you take a break, you pause, you have a coffee, you have a cinnamon bun, and you hang out with your friends, you catch up, you really rest and relax. And especially, and also in addition, in France as well, they have a huge culture of, you know, at lunchtime, at dinner time, you take a break, you sit down, you eat your lunch, you don't work at the same time as having your lunch, because at the end of the day, right, your employees are not paying you to work at lunch. So why not take that time out for yourself and really relax and reset and get ready for the afternoon of work? Because at the end of the day, they're not paying you for it. So why don't you take that break? But at the same time as well, what I've learned from different cultures from traveling is that there are cultures that really value taking a break at your lunchtime or sitting down at a table with friends and eating. You know, I really don't like to have phones. Like, we don't have phones on our table when we eat dinner. And I really like that because, you know, we're on these things, like, these things are addicted, bro. They're stuck to our hands, they're glued. There's a really cool photo which I saw actually, which I'm gonna prop up here, which I think is really just exemplifies how we're attached to our phones. But I really like what those cultures do. I really like what the Nords do. I really like what the French do. And I'm sure there's other cultures which I haven't gone to, which value eating together at a table and taking a break out of your day. You know, Italians love to do that stuff. They'll eat and drink late into the night, you know. So I really think being able to travel and being able to broaden your horizons and challenge yourself and put yourself in situations that you never would usually be in helps our character growth, helps our personal growth. So I know I'm talking from a very privileged position that I have the time and the money to be able to travel. And for some, that's not a possibility. But for others that do have that chance, that aren't taking it, take it. Fully take it, because it's great. Honestly, like I said, I'm an advocate for it. So I really hope you guys enjoyed this episode. I hope you got some really good value out of this episode, and there will be a new episode out next week. But tell me what you think in the comments in the section. Please like and subscribe. Send it to a friend, anyone that wants to work in tech or works in tech and think this would be a really good conversation for them to hear. I think you guys are really going to. I think you guys have enjoyed it, because obviously you're listening at the end of this now. But thank you very much for listening. We will talk soon.